Amazing. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Asian Women Advancing AI's Innovate and Advance series, where we spotlight trailblazing women, just like Jayeeta. And so this For the people who are new here, we started this organization in November of last year, and we are close to 700 members. um, just two recent updates. We got our first two interns. Actually, there was one kind of partial intern way back when, but two interns just starting earlier this week, and one of them is helping us with our Instagram page, and the other with the website. So I'm so grateful that Barry Singh here actually saw it on Insta and joined. And I'm hoping it was the AWAAI Insta, and I don't know if it was another Insta account. And then we also got our very first AWAAI chapter going in UNCC, University of North Carolina, Charlotte. So we are very excited about that. We are also looking to start a few other chapters. We've had a lot of interest. So people have reached out to us. So if anyone here wants to start a chapter, reach out to us. We'll be setting up a meeting in October for that. And let's get to the session. Um, Uvika will introduce our amazing speaker. And if you guys can be on mute while Jayeeta has her presentation going on, we'd appreciate that. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Uvika. Thank you.
Amazing. Welcome, everyone. So I'm super excited to introduce our amazing speaker, Jayeeta Putatunda. Jayeeta is an award-winning director of AI at Fitch Ratings, where she leads the development of scalable generative AI solutions for financial services. She also serves as an enterprise platforms advisor at NVIDIA, shaping the future of AI infrastructure. And most recently, she has also taken on the role of corporate venture capital scout at Hearst Lab, where she is helping to fund seed and early stage women-led startups, working to close the staggering gap where only 2% of venture capital currently goes to women founders. Woo! Her current impact and recognition in the field are nothing short of inspiring. She has also been honored with the A100 Award in Generative AI in 2024. And she is also named among the top 25 visionary women in FinTech AI. And her research on AI for financial inclusion has been presented at world-class conferences, including the ACM's ICAIF and AAA I-25. She also serves as a technical reviewer for leading venues such as New York IPS and Calling. But Jayeeta's contribution extends far beyond her technical achievement. She is a passionate advocate for diversity and representation in tech, serving as the NYC chapter lead for women in AI and as an ambassador for Stanford's Women in Data Science. She has even been featured on the Times Square billboard as one of North America's top 1% mentors. And I can go on and on and on. And we can be here
I have to cut short
this
my
entire
bio
evening listening about Jayeeta's
fun.
bio. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Jayeeta. We are super excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining in the session. Can you all see my slides? Okay.
Yeah, we can see.
I'm going to skip the introduction because I realized, I have to send smaller bios to folks. Thank you for sharing it to everybody who joined here. So today's session is more about really AI agents. I'm sure everybody, all of you, we have heard about what agents are. There's a ton of interest in the field. Everybody's thinking about different use cases, but the biggest challenge I see in the industry is that since it's a highly evolving space, everybody wants to start building. Once they start building, they figure out, oh, I have a lot of other foundational gaps that I need to fill, the problem that I need to identify. So this is always a structure that I really like talking about. Let's think through this, the problem discovery phase first, understand our data stack first, and then start building your code as well as validate and scale. This is what I was saying, right? Like most AI solutions start with the tech because somebody has heard about this tech framework that has come up yesterday and we want to deploy it today. It doesn't really start with the problem. And that's why I'm sure everywhere you hear this business-driven AI solving strategy that now people are kind of pushing for. And that comes from this same agenda, right? Again, just setting some context here, this very recent MIT report that kind of created a stir in the market. Why do you think they are stating that 95% of the generative AI pilots are like kind of failing at all of these different companies? The issue that some of the folks are not highlighting is that it's not a problem with the tech itself. Like the Gen AI tech is like really, really changing the way how some of the workflow is happening, but it's really the process implementation as well as your data strategy problem. Um, I like to kind of think of this and this iceberg analogy that hey, on the top of it, it feels like that, oh, I did this pilot. When I tried to put it in production, it failed. So it's not really a GenAI specific failure, but there was an inadequate understanding between the product team, engineering team on what we're trying to build, what our KPIs are. The implementation pipeline was not really strengthened. There was no LLM ops, there was no monitoring, there was no really guardrails or eval components built in the workflow end to end. And basically like insufficient resources doesn't meaning that you have like really a strong team, because I completely do not understand this vibe coding and the vibing process that people have really taken up. Because if you are not a subject matter expert, if you are not understanding the code that gets generated, if you cannot go back and fix the gap in the code, and if you cannot go and tweak the code to make it work in your business context, then you are going to fail with your vibe coding components. I'm sorry, I have strong feelings in that, but it's just because like I think the narrative has become that oh, you really don't have to understand code, just start building with natural language. It's a great starting point, but let's not try to finalize that as your end product. So before you start with any agentic capabilities or thinking through it, right, like figure out what you are really trying to solve, what are the key bottlenecks that you can sell your solutions with, so that it's coming down with that business agenda, as well as I would say the business buy-in much more easily. So data silos is the biggest challenge that we see across the board. There's tons of data, good quality data, uh, different formats of data, but do they talk to each other? Do they know what kind of metadata or data definitions are they updated? Not really. The compliance is also a pretty big area, and I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a pain point. I think it's required, at least for since the space is moving so fast, but it's still like kind of figuring out what your governance workflows are, figuring out or working together with your risk and legal team at the initiation of the projects, and not at the the end state. Then it'll be like, oh, you have some MVP you cannot deploy because you don't have the approvals of the teams. Complex data, again, I think people don't really understand or take it in as seriousness as you should, because like say if you are dealing with a PDF or unstructured PDF documentation, take any example, annual reports, sustainability reports, or any other financial documents, the probability that it has like a aggregated text plus image plus infographic plus tabular, it's like multimodal data sets, and like really building strategies across. I know people will say, oh, there are multimodal models that can handle this. It really cannot. If you are trying to build it in a scale, you cannot push all of that components in one type of model or at one trigger and then expect it to give you a really nicely extracted process. You have to have better like I would say data pipelines, one different for text, one for like say maybe tabular understanding, if you need maybe small language models trained for different specific kinds of tables, as well as like building that robust data pipeline. And I think the biggest area again is to really prove value, is to have your end users really see the value in the product that you're building so that it gets adopted right away. Analyst burnout, especially like when they're doing some of these very mundane tasks, data extraction or like data gathering or setting up data pipelines for future analysis, is like one of the key areas. Before I start, I would really like to highlight on this point is that not necessarily like like not necessarily LLMs can be equated to AI. It's a component or a part of it or one phase of it. So it's not like a magic pill that solves all of your problem, but that is usually the sentiment when, like, say, a new model comes up from Claude or like any other bigger foundational model saying that, oh, it has this much 1 million context length for Google's Gemini model. But is that really helpful for the kind of I would say the components you're trying to build? Is that really how much you need, or do you need more context? You need more tools, you need more access to different contexts in the previous chats. So you kind of build that system, and that is your AI system, which is more of a goal oriented. It can handle different data types, it can plan, execute, and not necessarily that one big LLM. It can be, like I said, small language models trained with your own data or own your company processes. The second part is, okay, what happened? It got stuck. Okay, the second part is that everybody, when we are building Gen AI solutions, they keep talking about, oh, like, is it AI versus is Gen AI going to take our job? And I think at this point, everybody realizes that there is no really escaping this. The tech really works. The faster we learn it, or faster we learn how to really build with it, that is how we kind of accelerate and keep our skills up to date. So it's more of like engineer system versus do you want to really keep processing with your legacy systems and not reap the benefits of some of this new age tech. The other parts to really, I would say, think about and keep in mind is that engineering excellence is like the part where most of the people are not really paying a lot of attention. And this is all based off of all the use cases I see across the industry, like what people are trying to build. Most of the time, it's like deploying and proving that an MVP will work. Of course, okay, with the tech and with some good guidance from our from the PMs, the product side, it will work. But can we really scale it out? That needs a really trustworthy engineering pipeline. And that's why I wholeheartedly believe that you cannot be a vibe coder, and software engineering jobs are not going anywhere. Because if we cannot like really scale and deploy GenAI-based MVPs in a safe and governed way, we're not really solving any other challenges. So how to really think about it and how to really start thinking about building these applications, right? The criteria you see here is I would say very similar to if you are even building a machine learning model. This would be your best practices to start with, identifying use cases. And I say this because like we were discussing before, assessing the complexity, the data silo requirements, and what kind of integration needs you might have is kind of like a make or break kind of a situation, at least at this point, because the tech works, the MVPs would work. What will not work is that your foundational data strategy as well as your engineering counterparts, if it's not ready to scale, to set up all the eval criterias, measure the I would say the strategies of success. It can be anything. Like it can be uh, I would say the business KPIs, or even the kind of business solutions that you're trying to solve for. Everything is a strategy in itself. So all these needs to kind of step by step really defined, getting a business buy-in, and that's how you kind of build an end-to-end holistic solution. When you think about this really amazing quote from Andre Karpathy, and he's like Tesla's former AI director. He keeps saying that there is this middle path in building agents. Not Don't start with building everything that's like highly autonomous, and you really don't know how to add human in the loop, or add the eval processes in a way that's really, I would say, safe, governed, especially for industry and finance, where any, I would say, misread output to your end client is kind of like a reputational and monetary risk. So how do you think about it? What he says is partial autonomy in high exposure tasks. And we will talk about it like an example, what some of those tasks are. But basically, the concept is that the human AI symbiosis, so the system should be designed with data, or I would say the augmentation in mind, and not really replaceability, if that makes sense. So you're really augmenting your workflow pipeline and extending the human's capability of performing a job, like say data extracting from like thousands of pages of PDFs that are required for any financial analysis. Traders read through hundreds of pages of document. How do we really do the data extraction with 100% accuracy, as well as make sure the pipeline runs as expected. And this concept of adjustable control is what we kind of consider when we think about what AI agents to build and what not to build. What we build is basically in this spectrum. So you have to choose how you are really thinking about your AI strategy in an organizational level, at your team level, as well as if you're like building for even like your personal ones. Uh, the higher autonomy ones is most of the time that is something that has less exposure. By less exposure, I would say that it's internal to your clients, or like say it's not something that your company is putting out directly, but it's more for like a consumption or like a mid step of a process. And there's always a person who's reviewing and using that as an output to do some other tasks. So it is intermediary step, not exposed to outside clients, is like a data input feed to a secondary pipeline that you have access to and catch errors if there is. So like say document summarization, data extraction from different reports, some basic calculations or analysis. You can always use agentic tools, processes, and then kind of set that up. The second part is like when you really start thinking about autonomy, where you are giving the model a little bit of autonomy based on your experiences, you learn from your mistakes, you kind of tune, add more context, add more tools, add more eval criteria, as well as guardrails. An example is that, say, if you are doing document summarization, and in the question or the document summarization query, if a user asks that, okay, based on this data point, give me a investment analysis that is this a good stock to buy or not? Just give you an example, right? There are always components in, I would say, the guardrails where you can set up, where you can set up those guardrails specifically mentioning that how to avoid off-topic intents, and those can be routed out to different components. So you really, so my goal to talk through some of these processes is that building that agent itself with all the available tool stack is not really a big deal anymore. We have like GenAI coding assistance tools. We have amazing frameworks like Crew AI, and we'll see some examples in the code like Crew AI and LangGraph, and anybody can really kickstart and build an MVP. But when you are building at scale, when you're building for your bigger organizations, there's much more decisions to think about and like really understand what you're building for, how much autonomy you are giving, what are the tools they have access to, they meaning the agents, how are you really governing them, how are you doing human in the loop at scale? Because yeah, human in the loop sounds good, but think about when an agent has processed I don't know, like thousands of documents and have a great report generated. Do you have humans sit through and read all the, I don't know, 500,000 rows of data, or are you doing like spot checking? Is that enough? Do you have other processes where you're doing summarization or like some kind of more causal analysis to ground the results? There's tons of way to kind of handle it, right? So those are the important key areas that any software developer, data scientist, leadership should really think about before building agents, because building agents is not really tough anymore. So every time people want to really, jump into building agents first, ask yourself, do I really need an agent? And this was the same rhetoric when we were doing machine learning and like, bigger. I remember when we were building neural nets, the conversation was like, oh, do you really need a neural net? I think a basic decision tree is enough. And that's true. And that's why even that same rhetoric even exists today, that are we really trying to complicate our workflow by applying some new age tech that we might not need, and those are agents. But start with like foundational processes, building semantic search through company databases. For that, you really do not need a specific search agent that can be incorporated within your company database with general semantic search. Azure has a semantic search. Elastic has very well semantic search implemented. So yeah, choose your battles and then kind of build on top of that progressively. The always, I would say, the easy entry point is having a simple RAG, vanilla RAG setup. If you are doing a quick conversational Q&A, having set up VectorDB, how to scale that VectorDB, different formats of data point, how to store in vector DD, vector DB, bring that together to kind of summarize. Very easy to do in basic RAG. Now, again, if you want to add more complexity, or there's different formats of advanced RAG, like what kind of chunking strategy you are using. If you want to access multiple knowledge bases, and the RAG system should kind of able to adjust all of that and bring all of that together to compare. All of these are different formats of, I would say, strategies that you take based on the complexity and the comprehensiveness of the problem that you're trying to solve. And I think at this point, agentic systems, which is a completely thought as like a completely autonomous pipeline, it really doesn't have to be there. Like we discussed before, a lot of the pipeline is more less autonomous. You can have external tools, but you can also have stop gaps to make sure that the agents stop, ask for feedback, give proper eval logging, and only then goes to the next step, right? Sorry, I know I'm going a little faster because we are almost at like 8:30, and we can like stop for a question at the end for like 10 minutes. But I wanted to like just cover and showcase some of the overall applications when you're thinking through. I know customer service automation comes or at the forefront. Everybody or every website has like a bot or a conversational bot. Initially they used to be so frustrating, but I'm sure now you have seen that it has become much better in terms of recognizing a question, and if it doesn't understand a question, handling that is like the bigger part. Because I remember just a quick anecdote is like back in 2016 I was working on a project for a big tech company where we were trying to build this internal chat for like, their clients to come and ask, like, say if my key to that particular software is not working anymore and I want to renew it or refresh it. They were asking in chat, and the chat was just giving like a link to the database, the backend database, and saying that, oh, find it yourself. That's not true anymore. Now you would see more intuitive conversation starters that is generated based on your previous context. So the LLMs are trying to understand the past conversation, take that into account, and then kind of guide the flow of the conversation. So it's definitely getting better with implementation, with learning, and with more business context. And what you see here is that kind of a difference between when you're starting with a project or like a use case. Think about like some of these categories. That does it have to have a high time response? So that means you really have to build a simple pipeline where you're using either not really too big of a models, because in inference time it's not working, or if it's taking 10 seconds to respond, your user is not going to stand there to really wait for the answer, and that would lead to a lot of frustration. There's also a ton of use cases where response time is not really, does not really matter. You can do batch or periodic processing, something like, say, if you have a governance AI process set up where you are constantly looking for new laws that has come up, or like different regulatory announcements that have come up, and then processing and comparing to see that, do you abide by it? Do you need to do any steps? And kind of triggering a workflow to notify the stakeholder. So yeah, ton of different ways to kind of really think through it. Yeah, these are just like some specific examples, but it's not really that it's not happening. It's already happening. If you read this article, this is a pretty good written article. There was like I would say a use case that was showing that implementing some of these large language based applications in constant reviewing of what's happening in the market kind of identified the signs that a ratings downgrade is going to come. So it's not really saying that, oh, I solved the entire problem, but it's kind of giving you a direction that potentially future, it's basically predicting, similar to what we were trying to do with predictive analytics model, giving those signals that an institutional investor might be interested to know. So even though finance is a very, I would say, stricter industry in terms of implementing some of these versus like, say, retail or other more less riskier industries, there is a lot of integration that's happening where people are testing out with different data and then seeing how they are performing. Okay, so sorry, a very quick overview, and I'm sure if you guys are building agents in the space or are interested, I have definitely read up. This is just a very quick outline. Uh, these are, I would say, the key structure of an agentic component. There is an agent that you are building. You are the user that's trying to invoke the agent. Either manually you are triggering or it's triggering by in the workflow. And the agent has the capacity to kind of access tools. It has a memory of its own. The memory can be any knowledge base that you provide, your company database, your news search that you do, or even like the initial context or like the previous context of a user chat. And planning is basically a capability for the agent to break down. If you're giving it a complicated task, it will break down it in simpler stages. Otherwise, the goal is to really see that how I can do one step at a time rather than trying to do everything at once. And the planning is set up in a way where the output of the first stage kind of becomes the input of the second stage. You can also have, I would say, concurrent processes that run. In that case, you have to give explicit explanation saying that, oh, by the time you're doing a web search, make sure that you are also looking up this calculation tool and summarizing some of the data or like calculating some of the data that's already there in the initial document. So you can guide the agent to think through a plan or how you want it to plan as well. And yeah, those are like, I would say, the basic structure of how an agent behaves. Like in the previous slide, here I try to like kind of break down that what each of the key skills any agentic application might have. It has the ability to interact with your environment, external factors, web search. It can, and I'm sure you've seen some of the demo that Claude has, where it can, get access to your browser and do some of the tasks on behalf of you. So that means it has the ability to click through a particular browser's buttons, or like go and book a flight, and it has that much of understanding where it's reading the backend information of that particular site. It knows how to trigger that workflow to book a flight, or like, call somebody, or even like, I don't know, book you or like order ice cream for you. I think it can do that. Um, but we are not really talking about some of those applications yet. This is more about how you are integrating the agentic flow in your actual work, or embedding into the workflow, not really for external applications, but for building the data pipeline or the financial processes. Data collection is another big one, where you are either gathering information from various internal sources or knowledge bases, or even looking up web search, performing the task. That's like, yeah, execute each of the process. And this is the biggest difference between what we had in our previous generation of large language models, right? Like not large, but transformer-based models like BERT. There, the conversation was much more like finding an information. That was what BERT was doing. Now, then when we had like a bigger GPT-based models, it was finding the information as well as like summarizing, giving different flavor to it, and giving back a different, or generating a different, not only like extracting, but generating a model. And then with agent-based framework, now it's actually executing a task. So not only generating, but using that, connecting it to the right sources via, say, tools, MCP servers, or anything, and then actually performing the task on behalf of you. So this is how you see, kind of the journey of how this entire backend backflow has kind of come in the last 3-4 years. And reasoning is also a big part of all of the components. Without reasoning, the model really wouldn't know how to do the planning, and that's where its autonomous capabilities come from. So whenever you are building any agentic patterns, and I think and you can look up some of these processes later on, but there's tons of way to really design your agent. It can be like more a router agent. You of course have an orchestrator agent. If you have, say, 5 different agents, you need an orchestrator agent to really orchestrate and think about, okay, which agent should I invoke now? Which, if you are, say, quick example, like if you are doing trying to write like a news article, and there are 3 agents, one for research, one for extracting the information, and one for summarizing. You wouldn't try to invoke the summarizer first, right? Because the first and the second is needed in order to perform the third agent's job correctly. So that is the role of the orchestrator. Where is that? where it has access to, I would say, a reasoning model, and it kind of reasons that, okay, in order for me to write an article, I need to do the web search first, extract all the information second, and then do the summarization and output it in a format that is required by the user. There's also a ton of talk about how we incorporate reflection, and reflection is nothing but, I would say, self-learning or self-criticizing behavior of a LLM that you're kind of leveraging in order to do the first step of evaluation. This doesn't mean that you are, kind of taking out eval frameworks that has to be more holistically set up end to end. But this is like one way of really forcing the LLM to think through its solution. Maybe you can give it more access to some other different tools that, oh, look, now look up all the previous, again, similar example, previous articles I wrote and compare the summary that you just generated and see, did you match all the business rules? This is a way to kind of really force it to go back, criticize its own output and reflect on it, and then re-optimize. It's also basically very similar to what evaluator optimizer framework talks about. You generate, you evaluate if that's good enough based on some business rules or some specific criterias, and then you kind of generate the output based on that initial feedback. Yeah, so based on your use case, what is the framework that's easy to build as well as easy to maintain, as well as, I would say, solves the goal? That is the strategy that you would take. My recommendation always is that really start smaller, start with like more prompt-based prompt chaining, having some reflection and some eval components ready. So that's what the React is. So React is like just reason and then act on top of the reasoning models, and then start making it more complicated as you see that it's working the way that is expected to. So when you're building solutions, for today's simple code base, we will see is that how can you do some portfolio analysis, understand some information, and let me go to the code and actually show you. I will share this collab notebook with everybody after the call, just to make sure that you can see, just making it a little bigger. Hope this is visible enough. Okay, so
Yeah, it's good.
sorry. So the example that you will see here is built on top of, built on top of this 4 components. Yeah, this is just a workflow diagram to understand that. Built on top of these open source solutions stack. Agno is the framework. I really like using it because I feel it's the right amount of abstraction. If you're really starting out new in the area, when you try to learn LangGraph and or Crew AI, sometimes it gets a little too complicated because they give you a lot of extra features to tune. But Agno is like a great framework to start. They have completely revamped their website as well. I think I have it open here. If you go to the home, let's see, if you just search for agno.com, you see they have a ton of documentation as well. So how can you get started? The kinds of agents you can build, the knowledge base access that you have, what kind of knowledge you can host. So yeah, you can add PostgreSDB, SQLDB, or whatever, custom knowledge retrievals, everything, all of that is kind of really well documented here. You also have like a list of tools that they have access to that you can kind of call in your code base. Like you see here, web search is already built in using DuckDuckGo tools, but you also have the ability to write your own tools, which is really fantastic. And here, the tool that they are writing, like as an example, is that going to Hacker News and extracting 10 stories. It's just, it can be part of the web search, but there you don't have the capacity to add, I would say more, sorry, I should have made it bigger. Added like a more complexity, but here you really are going through story by story, the number of stories, if you have a specific text that you're trying to retrieve based on which, so maybe a keyword search, and then you do a final summarization. So yeah, you can create your own tools. It has a ton of flexibility of like what kind of matrix you can also measure. So yeah, give it a read, and I think this is a great framework to start off with if you are building for the first time, or like even if you're exploring. Grok is also This is not the Twitter Grok model. This is the Grok API. They are more of like an inferencing company, and they have a ton of model in production that you can leverage in the free tier. Of course, there is some limitations of how many times you can call the tokens, but this is just to get you started, right? So that you know if your solution works or not, or give you a hands-on demonstration to that. So you see there's ton of Llama models here. There's GPT-OSS, which is the open source that first time OpenAI released, right? Like I think a month ago. And some whisper-based models. So yeah, there is also a paid component to it, but start free. Start with it like in the free version and then give it a go. So if I go back to the code, what I tried to do here is basically build two agents. One is a deep research agent for some financial and market research, and the other is some financial data extraction agent where I'm going to go and try and extract read some market real-time market data. And you can also read or extract data from PDF. So maybe that's a good use case to give it a try if that works. I try to explain all the tech stack that I used here, the installation components, the environment setup. Yeah, so only thing you would need is like a Grok API that you can get from here. It's free to get the API. I think I'm logged in. Anyway, yeah, when you say start building, you go in. Oh, here is it. So when you go to the API keys, you will see that there's some create API component. Just give it a name, and you're going to get that key. So transfer that key back to here, and then that's all you basically need. This is where I start importing all the libraries. So like we discussed, there's the Grok, the Agno agent that I'm calling DuckDuckGo tools for my web search capability, as well as, and another good thing is that since it's in Colab Notebook, and every time you click over any of the methods, you really see what the toolkits are doing and supposed to be performing as their method definition. So a good way to keep on following the code as well as learning through that. In the deep research agent, don't worry about like all of the processes here. Just look through some of these components. Like when I initialize the agent, I have to provide a name. So I provided the deep research agent as a name. I gave it a role, very, very important. Basically, we are setting up the agent to really behave in a way that we want it to behave. Some of the other example that I usually work with is like, I set up that, oh, you are an economic analyst and you are looking at some of these news. Think of it from the macro point of view and give me an analysis step by step of what this, like say, Fed decrease the by 2.5, right? The rates. What are the implications of that in number one, this economy, this economy, this economy, and then do a news research to kind of find all those and then summarize. So depending on that, the role would change. That time it'll not be like a financial research, but more of like I would say econometrics or economic specialist. When you give the instructions, you also have to kind of highlight of what are the specific components you want the agent to behave with. So if you are a financial research analyst with web search capabilities, so here we are explicitly saying that, look, we have provided you with tools, which is the web tools that has been initialized here as the access to query DuckDuckGo tools. So we're saying that, okay, you use web search to find current information, news research, market trends, and all that stuff, and keep responses that you generate under 500 words with clear bullet points. So this is basically setting up the expectation, setting up the expectation. It sounds funny that, oh, we expect from people, but now we also have a lot of expectation from GenAI and agents. So we are really being clear in our responses, in our asks, so that there's no vagueness or uncertainty in instructions. So the different components here, and I try to like be as, I would say, add some nice code definitions, which I usually do not do in my regular work, but I tried to be a little more verbalized here. So the goal of this function is to really conduct focused research on a given topic. And you would see the query here. It'll try to find 3 to 4 bullet points, identify key risks and stuff like that. Another function is like analyze industry trends for a particular trend that is given, and then you define what you want it to include, and this is how you kind of initialize the deep research agent. That's one part. Then the financial data agent is more like you really want to have it to access to real-time market data. So here we are giving it this tool, which is a finance tool. And if you see what I initialize in the finance tool is like a Y finance tools directly. Y finance is nothing but um, here. So Y finance tool is nothing but a really good way to kind of look into all the market stock rates, what is happening, how it's also a library, but it's kind of constantly curating information from the live market. So we are calling that, sorry, and kind of giving it again instructions like we discussed. So yeah, use the financial tools to get what current stock price is. So that's the get current stock price, the company information, the financial fundamentals, as well as like some key ratios like PE ratio and return ratio and all that. The goal here is again to really set up the sections of what you want to do. If you want to do sector-wise comparison, like say multiple stocks from that sector, you want the agents to give you like a performance comparison, valuation matrix, whatever it is, like whatever task you are doing. In this one, the market sentiment one, I wanted it to include like a recent price trend or like the market sentiment. What are people talking about in the market space? So you're really defining the components as you want it to build it through. And then you kind of test, you give it a couple of examples. I ran it with Tesla. Sorry, I think when I uploaded my code from local to Colab, it's not here. So give it a run once I send you. If you get stuck in any of the process, happy to help review that. So the entire workflow here that you see is basically you trying to create smaller frameworks or modularized agents to kind of go do web search, bring in information, do some analysis, summarize, and then give you a overall, I would say, a feel of how the agent's supposed to work. There's tons of other information, or I would say processes that we should consider. Yeah, the link is here, so you can click it through here when I send out the process. But I would say the key component that I shouldn't end the talk without talking about is validation as well as matrix. So accuracy is just like one very baseline. Some of the times we also have to think from the business focus that, oh, when I build this agent, it's amazing that it's giving me like, accurate result, but the more important ones are like, oh, how much time did I save? How much was the efficiency gain? Did I adhere to all the regulatory standards, or like does it match all my compliance processes? Does my risk team understand? And then there's some evaluation frameworks that are more tech focused, like is my tool good enough? There's this I would say great framework to think in, keep in mind that you have to analyze all of, so as, again, let me restart. So as big or complicated your agent structure becomes, each of those components needs to be specifically analyzed. So if you're adding tools, your tools has to be analyzed with the different tool selection and function calling eval set. It cannot be the same with according to your planning capabilities, right? Because the ground truth for each of these components is completely different. For the tool selection, you would like to like evaluate that, did the agent or the orchestrator agent call the right tool? Did it get how many times did it have to call the tool set to get the right answer? If it's calling, say, more than 2 or 3 times or failing in the initial couple of runs, that means that either there's some inefficiency in your code, or the API is not set the right way, or the tool is not set the right way, or the LLM is not able to reach to the tool via the application in some way. So that is how you basically optimize based on each of the processes that you kind of build through. Planning is one. Another is like that everybody's really talking about these days is, I'm sure you've heard like prompt injection. That's how you add more, I would say, it's like a Trojan horse. How do you add like more uncertainty to your LLMs and make them behave that they shouldn't be really doing? So this is a really great framework to think in mind. Sometimes I've seen examples where people say that you have to tell me or I will make you pay. And sometimes that's what the make me pay framework talks about, is that then the LLM kind of budges and goes through and reveals information that it shouldn't. And that's why some of these red teaming and evaluation is so critical. And we already talked about self-evaluation. So, I mean, there's tons of other frameworks or formats that can be implemented, but start small, start building through it and see how it works. This is a great paper that I really like on self-reflection. If you want to read it through, yeah, just look up self-reflection LLM agents, and it kind of talks through how or what the algorithm inside the LLM is really thinking through. And it's nothing but like a for if loop. And I kind of joke that, yeah, for if is where we started with for loops and ifs in Python. Then we had bigger, deep learning models that was also hidden under it was for if models. And again, in like our LLM self-reflection, there is this go back and forth, answer, reason, go evaluate. So it's a completely logical and not really magic of any kind. So yeah, I think that was most of the part that I had. Yeah, just to end, I think we are right at time for Q&A. Is that really start with a problem-driven approach. Think about, focus on what business needs you're trying to solve, and then work backwards, because then now you have the KPIs you need to solve, you have the stakeholders, support or like buy-in, and you have their time to help you build that ground truth data that you really need to do the evaluation components. Because if you do not do evaluation and you just, depend on, oh, I'm just gonna, look through it, and if it feels nice or if I vibe with it, then I will release the model, then it's going to be like a kind of a catastrophic failure. So yeah, it has a ton of opportunity. Everybody's talking about it. There's a really a good layer of use case. But yeah, how do we really think about building carefully, prioritizing all our ethical considerations, the data privacy issues, as well as like building for our workflow is the goal. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Happy to answer any questions. And I can also share the notebook and the slides later on if you have any questions, or if you run across any issue running the code. I am happy to help set that up as well. Yep, that was a lot of talk from me.
No, it was amazing. It
I'm
was
gonna,
power-packed and amazing. Thank you so much. I think Evan has a question. So, Evan.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Wow, Jayeeta, I tried to write down everything you said. It was like my hand is like, wow. But that was great. I would love the notebook, number one.
Mhm.
Number two, I talked to someone this week. He's a developer, but he kept asking me, how do you put an agent on-prem, and he says, how do you orchestrate going to different platforms and different systems and different cloud? I think
Mhm.
he was missing the concept of you don't have one agent doing that. Like I was trying to get him to say, where is your orchestrator agent? Where is
Mhm.
your task
Trigger
agent?
agent.
Where is your cloud agent? So if you walk up to him, he's an expert developer, but how do you convince him how many agents he needs to for for five platforms, five cloud? He's going to be, what's the best way of helping him?
Yeah. So good thing that has come up from some of these MCP protocols. Initially, what was happening is that initially meaning like 3 months 4 months ago, the industry is changing so fast. So yeah, even for till 4 months ago, when we were trying to build some of these agents, we were trying to like attach it with like different API formats. And giving you an example, like say the project that you're working on has data sitting in Oracle, has data sitting in MongoDB, has data sitting in Azure Cloud, just give you an example.
Mhm.
And when you are building that end-to-end workflow, it has to kind of query each of it, see if it has enough information, bring it all together, and maybe do a summarize. Just again, a simple example. For that, you have your API connected as like a tool. So that's the tool calling you are doing for that particular agent is triggering that, oh, now I need to fetch data from Oracle for this particular, say, entity for a particular company data set that you have there. Now I have to go and fetch from Elastic or Azure Search and then bring it all together in its internal memory and knowledge base. But now you're not really building it in a such complicated way. Now the MCP servers that you are setting up, and each of these vendors or any database companies now have their own servers that you can directly connect through your cloud. So that MCP server is becoming like a gateway for that agent to directly interact with it, extract all the information, and I think it has made the workflow much, much simpler. Now you have only one data collection agent that has access to 5 different MCP servers. It chooses which MCP server to connect to, fetch that data back. If it needs more information, it identifies, because of it has a reasoning model and prompt instruction provided, that it needs to also go to the Elastic to fetch more information about company data and then find the reviews, or do I have enough to generate a summary, and it kinds of goes through it. So the concept is now with the MCP servers is that it is like a tool that you can now leverage end to end and give your agents the power to reason through that which tools to really access to get to the final stage that it has planned step by step. So this, I would say the processes and workflows are getting much, much easier. So like you said, think through how much complicated agents do we need? 4 different agents for 4 different clouds? At this point, maybe not. Maybe you have 2 different agents, one for structured database, one for unstructured database, or however you kind of work through it, and then kind of set those server connections up. Those are most important to make sure that you have all the governance guidelines followed while you are setting up those MCP servers. So there is like no data leakage and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you still need self-reflection, right? For the
I mean,
agents who
that's,
you,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that's part of like your final generation, I would say, evaluation before you give it out to your end user, or and like I would say, think about reflection as like a pre uh, pre-evaluation before the person or the user actually sees the output. But as developers, we also have to maintain the post-generation or post-generation evaluation frameworks, because that is how you kind of refine your pipeline, fix any issues, say generated 5 bullets instead of 2, just giving an example. That is something that you are really fixing in the post-generation, updating prompts, updating systems, and yeah, break that down as you plan.
Okay, thank you.
Next,
Zeba.
Zeba.
Hi, great session. As Padmini said, power packed. Uh, a little about me. I was recently working, like I was a couple of months ago, I was working at Capco as an AI engineer. And one of the things that a lot of discussions were surrounded around was open source versus closed source
Mm-hmm.
LLM models. And
Yep.
I want to hear your opinion as an expert in this AI in finance, where finance is heavily regulated
Mm-hmm.
and there's just not a lot of things you can do in terms of flexibility of AI. What have you seen in trends that are people moving towards open source, but a lot of the best models are hidden behind paywalls? So there is a whole debate going on. And
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on those things?
Yeah, I think it's first of all, I'm not really an expert. I think it's everybody. The field is changing every day. I wake up and I was like, oh, there's 20 other papers that I'm supposed to read this week that I haven't read, and so yeah, not really an expert, but trying to like keep up. So yeah, for your question, very legitimate question, and that's also something that you have to decide on after you do your initial spike, or like spike meaning like trying to figure out what workflow would work, what are the best models, what is the actual real business ask, and based on that. And then there's also some of the I would say some of the sentiment is that if a particular model, even if it's like closed source, I mean, at this point all organizations have access to Azure, like Anthropic models or like OpenAI models of some form. So there's really like no requirement to reinvent the wheel. Rather, you really strengthen your workflow pipeline, and then that engineering capacity evaluation, LLM ops, there's tons of more optimization scope rather than like trying to build the best model. But where the open source models comes in handy is that, say, if you have a very specific or a niche kind of a use case where you are seeing that the bigger models are not performing, or it's taking tons of time to refine, and like continuous improvements. Maybe there you start with like a open source model, and then you train it on, like fine tune it based on your company specific data. Again, you have to also make sure that you have your SME support to help you build that data. Otherwise, again, there's like there will be like a gap of how much you can do. But I think at this point, the debate is not really with open source. It's more like LLM versus SLM. Like if you have a use case that you are just doing some intent classification, do you really need to call an LLM? Yeah, they're getting cheaper, but at scale, when you are processing millions of requests, it kind of adds up there. So maybe on that context, having a smaller LLM, SLM trained on that specific routing or intent routing methodology is like a better way to go. So yeah, you choose based on like the thing that you're trying to solve, as well as what you have at hand, how much support from SMEs, as well as like, yeah, all the other factors.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Shubham, do you want to ask your question next?
Yeah, sure. Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Yeah. So my question is more specifically right for when we do agentic application, right? Scaling, right?
Mhm.
And our database is like in terabytes or petabytes. And so then there's a question comes around, right, for the trade-off.
Mhm.
Like, do we wanna, if you want to run some query, right, do we wanna waste our compute on vector databases to use agentic application, or do we wanna just do a simple traditional database search query, BigQuery, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I wanna know how are you seeing the trends, right? What are the trade-offs going on, right? Because not every business can afford those compute power, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was actually one of the slides, right? Like where I was saying that you don't really start building for any use case directly straight with like a what do you call a sorry an agent framework, but maybe just doing a more semantic search. So if you have access to Elastic, Elastic has a ton of more capabilities that they are do now provide. I think they have also multimodal capabilities that have introduced. But again, all of this decision needs to happen at that initial use case and leadership level, leadership meaning like a tech leadership level, as well as your data science feedback, that is cost the blocker, or do you really need to make this as accurate as possible? Do you have enough data points or like enough engineers who can handle all that pipeline, build it, or do you want to build it on top of like some already available solutions? Like for some use cases, if you see there is agents directly through Crew AI. Just give you an example that you can already build and initiate, versus if you really want to build everything hands-on, keep the entire developmental control internally, you can use LangGraph that gives you more flexibility, something like Agno that gives you more flexibility. And again, going back to your database query, it's the same, I would say, discussion that what is your priority. Most of the times I have seen if a company is building a RAG based solution or like trying to introduce Gen AI, at least in the initial phase, it's not really a cost problem. It's more of like, do you really have the support to set up a vector database? Because it's not just like lift and shift. There's like a ton of pipeline engineering stuff that is needed to be done. And that's why there's so many external vendors, right? Like Pinecone has like a complete managed service that you can set up a Pinecone in your own internal AWS cloud or whichever cloud, and they will manage it completely, and you just worry about uploading the data and getting it out of it. So yeah, you choose your battles based on capability, resource, talent meaning like the skills that you have at hand, as well as yeah, the cost implications. But I think overall the costs is really coming down, but in a way it's kind of adding up because now people want to do too much at a time and not really one by one. So that was a long-winded answer of saying it depends.
Yeah, I just had a second part to that question was that
Yeah.
are you seeing the database for the vector database going to more towards graph databases and and are you or I think it's third question sorry about that
No,
is
no, no
that are
worries. I
you
think,
saying right
oh, yeah.
if you have right um, already set up right you have legacy system you have everything right in your traditional databases and creating a layer over that of agentic agents that do work with like as you said right like Elasticsearch data right it
Mhm,
what it does gives you ranking and whatever is right
mhm,
on the top that you want and
mhm,
then do agentic application on that.
mhm. So to your first question, yes, I think graph databases have been there forever. Like knowledge graphs have been there for a long time, but I think with the capacity of what LLMs can do right now to kind of handle, find some, I'm not saying causations, but some kind of correlations from the data you provide, knowledge graphs is kind of coming back, but I wouldn't say that it has really become mainstream. I would say I've seen graph databases used as like more of a evaluation grounding process. So you have all your vector databases, you generate queries, but you want, like I was saying, how do you really scale human in the loop? You have to create in a way that where LLMs are serving as a judge, doing some kind of summarization, and then giving you some feedback where the human is now able to review. I think graph database is also something similar where it's really helping doing or making those connection of dots and then telling the user, hey, does this relation look right? Is this output from this, is the format look right? And then kind of help you set that stage up. So it's definitely getting a lot of attention, but I don't think it's mainstream yet or can handle the complexity of some of these more unstructured data when it's tracked out thousands of relations. I think it's going to get too much too quickly and too hard to manage to kind of really get any value out of it. And by now I forgot your third question, which was
Yeah,
so
I'll repeat. So you have already legacy system, right? Pipelines are
oh
already
yes,
built,
yes,
and
yes.
you just want
Yes,
to
yes.
build an AI
Yeah.
agentic layer above it.
I think that is what everybody's trying to do, right? Like at least in the initial MVP phase. Do you really think that the traditional data layer or like, the legacy pipeline layer, do you think everybody's like kind of rescoping and pushing everything out? Not really. Like they're trying to build modularized way wherever they can on top of that, and then trying to see that how much did I improve efficiency? That is their selling points. Selling points meaning like selling to the leadership that look, I had this complicated pipeline. It took my analyst to complete this in 2 days. Now I'm doing in like say 1.5, like 1 day. So I saved the time by optimizing in this modular areas. Now we need more of a, I would say, full-fledged plan that how do we really migrate from that legacy system to a more Gen AI friendly data pipeline system. So yeah, I don't think any use case I have seen across that's really trying to revamp the traditional system at first is just trying to find those sweet spots of where they can embed the Gen AI components in the workflow, and then kind of like going step by step to really optimize it. And that's how it should be ideally. Like you really don't take the $1 billion bet to transform everything without seeing, some value or prove the value of the process in the initial stages.
Yeah, thank you.
Harshil, I think you can go next. Harshil, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey. First of all, thank you so much, Jayati, for such an amazing session. I just had one question. So, like, we are also working on a chatbot, and we are facing this issue of so essentially, like, there are like 2 to 3 issues. The first one is like how do you solve or apply or use ChatGPT with the live data? So essentially, I think that it would be similar problem in finance where we have like live data coming in, and we need to query that data with the updated data. And second thing is like how do we solve about the repeatability of the answers which the AI provides? So essentially, for like one user, it gives a little bit different answer. For second user, it gives a little bit different answer. So
So you're
are
saying
these
you're
trying to,
standardizing of the answer. So it's not really standardized, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
standardization?
Yeah. I mean, like, let me answer that first. I mean, like, it's not really ideal to expect a deterministic answer from a Gen AI model. Like the Gen
Correct.
AI components are not really deterministic. And there was a great paper recently that kind of OpenAI released that proved that some of these hallucinations and discrepancies in answer between 1 to 2, it's not really the LLM's fault, but it's more like how it was trained. It was trained to be rewarded if it does the right thing. And sometimes that meant that making up answer even if it didn't have enough context, and as well as having a little bit of differentiation in answer in different variances. I have tested this thoroughly, even decreasing the temperature, which is
Yeah. Solution.
yeah, which is not the solution really, because it doesn't still work. It's not a one-to-one match. If you do like a word-to-word vector match with two answers output from the same model with temperature 0 with like 5 different runs, it will not like 100% match. There would be some differences. So I think it's an inherent feature really of any GenAI model, and I don't think we really are trying to solve that anymore. What we are trying to solve is the bigger component that it shouldn't give me any out of context or irrelevant information that is not in the context that I have passed as a user, or it shouldn't like make up numbers when it doesn't know. That's the bigger challenge, I think, at least for the quantitative and the financial side.
Mhm.
And that's just because the LLMs are not really great at math. Like that's not their strong points, and that's why having some of these more tools which can be like, I create a more econometric model tool that I internally might, I'm just saying like the
Mhm.
company internally uses for their predictive model tool, I can transform that tool as like a tool that the model um, uh, queries, right? So that kind of baselines or stabilizes the output and sets it up for success by giving that enough ground information. So yeah, we really have to figure out what we are trying to solve for and not really push for it to be the perfect pill. And for the previous question, what you're saying that how ChatGPT can have access to live data, I mean,
So
has it?
essentially, like for you also that I don't know, like in finance, there will be a use case, right, where we have to query on the live data or the live aggregations are to be summarized to the
Yeah,
higher
that's
leadership.
doable, right?
Yeah. So how do we kind of like what is like at your company, like what is the level you usually try to go for? Is it like per second, per minute, or like I'm talking about the data refresh, right?
Yeah. Again, I really can't like talk about what we do specifically for
Yeah,
our
not not
uh,
not
bound
not
by
yeah,
some
yeah.
restrictions there. But I think overall the goal is to make sure that you, at the first stage, set up the user's expectations. And that is why most of the time have seen the frustration come up with, if I give them a tool saying that this is amazing, just go and search everything and you'll get the right answer within seconds. And if it takes more than 5 seconds, they will be frustrated and
Correct.
they'll say, oh, this tool doesn't work. So setting your user's expectation of what they are looking for or what is the power of the tool they're interacting with is the first step to really build
Mm,
any solution. Second is that anytime you are doing more, I would say, research or deep research specific, the data refresh happens like on the search. There's a ton of data that flows in our internal, no,
correct.
in whatever use case internally. When it flows in, you choose
Mm,
based on the analysis. Some of the analysis are really happening not on the go. Some of the analysis is happening in the backend as a batch. And for some, which is like highly critical, say, think of a trader, it needs to happen like, on spot, but there's still some lag there. So you choose really very high performing models to quickly churn through and have access to multiple tools that can do those calculations and spit out answers in much faster rate, versus if it's more of a deep research or a more of a batch processing of a bigger, I would say, like say weightage, giving weightage to different formats,
mm,
that takes a ton of other complicated calculations that really cannot be done on the fly. So yeah, I think setting the expectation, building tools for what they're really supposed to do, and not selling everybody that, oh, this is magic, is the step to building
yeah.
more acceptable products.
No, I totally echo with you. Like it is not a magic pill. It won't wonder like work wonder for everyone. So are you like how are you exploring this feature? Like usually like there is like one chatbot and we kind of try to personalize it according to user preview or the user I would say demand, right? So like trader has a different expectation from a chatbot
Yeah, I
and
don't think,
maybe a
yeah, I understand your
line
question.
manager. Hmm.
Yeah, I understand your question. I don't think these are the same tools that they have access to. And
Yeah.
across industries, I have heard different ways that people try to solve for this. Either they have like say different personas, or like
Hmm.
say they have different embedded workflows. So what tool that the um, trader is accessing to get all the information is not the same that our not our, like any PM is accessing. So it's basically serving at the different level with the level of details and the latency they need. And I don't think having like a one-stop shop solution is an answer to that. That is more like for exploration initially, if you're just trying to understand the tool, what its capabilities are. But at the end of the day, that's not really embedded in your workflow. So it will only scale that much. And how many times will you really copy paste an answer from your end, go to a different UI? So it all has to like really come together as a workflow in the back end, not really through UI anymore. I don't really think people are that interested in having like more of a conversational agent that's just for your understanding or like initial exploration, but it should auto happen in the workflow embedded, which is a bigger fish to fry.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jayeeta.
And thank you for staying back for so long. Just one last question and we'll let you go.
I have one
Geeta.
too. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Padmini,
I had
after
one
you.
too. I had one too, but
Oh
I
my God.
decided just drop it. Geeta, why don't you go ahead?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to know, have you encountered any model drifting, in production, and how do you manage to handle those model drifts?
Yeah. I mean, like model performance drifting, not as much because like, some of these models are pretty steady after a version has been released, but there's definitely a lot of, I would say, data drifting based on different contexts or like different kinds of, say, backend information that was updated, or we are bringing, again, not we, like any organization or whatever, the context files or the PDFs are changing, and some maybe say new logics are getting evolved. So that's why the having that LLM ops, or what you call like more of a monitoring system that has a very specific way to identify if something goes above threshold, beyond threshold, or like even I would say like for unstructured data, if you're finding topics out of your aggregated average topic set that was not there before, that is coming into the pipeline, people are ingesting it in their business applications to make sure that it's like not really breaking anything. Having that LLM ops set up is like, I would say, the key way of using evaluation guardrails the best way possible, and using that as your feedback loop to really build your or iterate and optimize your AI application workflow.
Thank you. I appreciate the session. It's very, very, very informative.
No, thank you for staying, and it's almost 9:15 here, and yeah, I'm sure it's dinner time, and folks are waiting to get back. So I really appreciate your time and engagement. Yeah, I think that's all I had.
Uvika, did you have anything or yeah?
I feel really bad. I think, Jayeeta, we can just send you the stuff. I know you have a small one, but with that, thank you so much.
She's off to bed. That's fine. I still have to go back and log in and work more, but
Oh my God.
it's fine.
We'll send you other questions if people have, like, I know Uvika
Yeah,
and
sure.
I have, we'll send it to you by, in a message. And no, thank you so much for your time today. It was a brilliant session. There's so much to learn. I think we'll have to go back and rewatch
The
the
recording,
recording.
yes.
No, makes sense. No, thank you. The space is continuously changing, right? That's all we can do, like keep reading up and keeping up to date and like following some best practices. That's how you kind of build some useful stuff. But yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your time. And
No,
thank you
thank
so
you
much
very
for
much.
staying.
And for everybody, do follow, connect with Jayeeta or follow
If you
her,
have any questions.
Yeah.
No,
so-
Really appreciate
if you have any questions,
Yes.
feel free to
Yeah.
reach out.
Yeah, is there a link to the notebook that you presented?
I can share. I'll clean that up and I'll share it with Padmini and Uvika, and then
Sounds
hopefully
good.
they can
Thank
send
you.
it out.
Yeah, we'll send it out to everybody who joined,
Mhm.
so you'll have access to that. Uvika, any closing thoughts?
No, just be on the lookout. Our calendar is getting ready for October events, and we have some amazing stuff. So be on the lookout. It should be coming up, I think, next week. Padmini's going to be posting. So
Yep. So yeah,
Nice.
especially for DC folks or people who are willing to travel to DC. So
Yes,
yeah, that's
there's a
all
lot
I'm
of
going to say.
surprise coming.
All righty.
Nice.
Thank you so much,
Thank you very much.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for joining and have a
Bye.
great
Have a good
evening.
evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.